After the landmark first season of The Angry Video Game Nerd and the success that the series had seen online over the last year, 2007 was set to not only be a year of further evolution and growth for the show, but would also start what I consider to be the apex of AVGN. A time of laughs, a time of innovation and inspiration. A time when the series was not only at its absolute best, but was also influencing literally everything else around it. One of the most important times for YouTube as a platform, and perhaps the internet and content creation at large. A simpler time, many may say a better time. The golden age of the angry video game nerd.
He's gonna take you back to the past. He's gonna take you back to the past. To play the shitty games that suck ass. He'd rather have a buffalo take a diarrhea dump in his ear. He'd rather eat the rotten asshole of a roadkill stump and down it with beer. He's the angriest gamer you've ever heard. He's the angry Nintendo nerd. He's the angry Atari Sega nerd. He's the angry video game nerd.
The golden age of AVGN for me is between seasons 2 to 4, something which I hope by video's end you'll understand exactly why I have this particular time frame. I want to evaluate what made this era of content so important, why I consider this to be some of the best content ever made by James, as well as some of my history with the show at this point as I grew up alongside it, and overall give fans old and new a fresh perspective on the whole era. With all that said, let's rolling rock right into Season 2. So this first one is kind of a weird one, because outside of the Cinemassacre website, or re-uploads, this episode of The Nerd is mostly lost in any official manner. The episode is quite different from any of the past ones thus far, notably because it's actually a movie review. It was originally a 2-part video, later taken down off of YouTube due to copyright reasons, and then re-uploaded to Cinemassacre and ScrewAttack.com as a sort of hidden exclusive episode of the series. The video has the nerd reviewing the infamous third Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie and opens with the subtitle of The Angry Movie Nerd. This is perhaps only just a joke more than anything else, but all the same, it does make me wonder if it's a relic of what was originally going to be James' idea to do this more often. Maybe thinking of a side series called The Angry Movie Nerd, where he will do, well, what else but review shitty movies. It might have even developed into its own character in a similar fashion to how when James covers other media or complains about other things, he often has its own unique character, similar in fashion to the nerd, but always distinct in some way. But alas, any plans like that, whether they existed or not, must have been trashed when James was witness to how fast YouTube would take down his video for having movie footage in it, something that many content creators still struggle with to this very day. The actual review itself is well made. James does a good job not only describing some of the issues with the film, but also in comparing it with its 2 predecessors. Now, I'll be brutally honest with you fellas, I never really grew up with TMNT and have really little to no fucking interest in it whatsoever. But James, at his very best, makes the anger feel kind of personal, sort of like a lot of the best AVGN videos. It comes from a place of actual frustration with the film, and trying his best to describe that feeling even if you're not familiar with the franchise he's so passionate about. The video ends with this cool little finale.
It's hammer time!
Which makes for a great finish for the video, and is also, funnily enough, the only scene that you'll usually see on YouTube and even the DVD release of the AVGN Season 2, once again due to copyright over the film clips. With this video out of the way though, it's time we dive into what many might consider the first real canon episode of Season 2. Starting out with what is one of my all-time favorite episodes of the whole series, the first episode covers the history and general issues with the infamous Atari 5200.
This is a video game. This is what you immediately think of whenever you hear the term. It's the Atari 2600, and it defines the word classic.
It would also be the first episode to feature the now iconic theme song of the series, one that has stuck to this very day.
Gonna take you back to the past to play the shitty games that suck ass. He'd rather have a buffalo take a diarrhea dump in his ear. He'd rather eat the rotten asshole of a roadkill skunk and down it with beer. He's the angriest gamer you've ever heard. He's the angry Nintendo nerd. He's the angry Atari Sega nerd. He's the angry video game nerd.
This theme song, as stated before, perfectly fits the Nerd series, that being this funny video game review show with a little bite and edge to it. It's no wonder it's stuck around to this very day and has more than likely a couple hundred remixes by this point. Anyway, we start on a very different tone for a Nerd episode, with him calmly talking about the history of the Atari 2400 and the atmosphere and general charm of these very old games, juxtaposed by the introduction of the console of the episode's namesake.
Because it's a pile of fucking shit. Why? Well, just look at it.
Look at how huge this beast is. It's ginormous. And why is there a door on it? Is this a video game console or a fucking closet?
What I love about this episode is that the majority of it is just the nerds setting up the console, getting little bits of history and complaining all along the way. There's also a lot of physical comedy that makes this one fairly unique from other episodes of the Nerd, even to this day. One of my favorite gags being when he drops the TV on his foot. I don't have to tell you that this, of course, didn't really happen. It was just special effects, but the way it's shot and quickly shown is enough to catch you off guard, and it works pretty well. The Nerd goes on to talk about the 5200's terrible controller and why the system ultimately failed because of it. In fact, we never actually get to see the Nerd play any games in this video since he can never get the fucking controller to work.
This controller is a piece of shit.
What's the most important aspect about any fucking game? Well, being able to fucking play it. And what do you need to fucking play it? A fucking controller. So what do you do when the controller doesn't work? You're fucked. This is the reason the system failed. This. In the name of God, heaven and hell, everything in between, every creature on earth, by the far reaches of the galaxy, by the inner rims of the universe, and every megaverse in the ultraverse, let it be known. Let the word be known. This controller is fucking horrible.
But honestly, he didn't even need to. The script and physical humor of the episode is enough to make it more than entertaining. This episode is also the first time I can call the Nerd comfy. As the episode goes on, you get a good sense and feel for the room the Nerd is in. And the relaxed tone of the episode always made this one a great one to rewatch over and over again. I don't really want to jump the gun too far, but I will say that this comfier vibe exhibited here really seems to be one of the defining traits of Season 2, and hell, really most of the golden age of the AVGN. A perfect combination of a cozy atmosphere and good humor. Next, we have the Ghostbusters video trilogy. Like the TMNT3 video, we start off with James' history with the Ghostbusters series, and the cultural pull it had at the time being explained to us. I particularly like how James shows off some of his childhood toys here as well. If you've noticed, the last few episodes have started off with the nerd in a good mood, talking about the history of a series, a console, and his personal connection to it before eventually breaking the tone drastically with the nerd introducing the game or thing that's going to be reviewed. This is, in my mind, a clear evolution to the AVGN formula, and one that makes these videos far more interesting from the get-go, slowly dipping us into the time frame when the game or thing was first released in a way that always managed to catch my attention and made me ultimately care and feel for the nerd's anger and complaints a lot more in the process. The first video of the trilogy is definitely one of the best in that I can feel your pain sort of way. The nerd goes into extraneous detail about the NES Ghostbusters game, covering every single aspect about it, really selling you the mind-numbing nature of its gameplay, its monotonous music, dull graphics, and general repetitive nature and time management system, ending with this great final moment.
What the fuck? What? What?
The second video of the trilogy mostly recomes over the NES game again, this time talking about the game in a purely technical, much more analytical level, taking it in, as he puts it, a more constructive approach. There's a lot of good stuff during this segment, like the spell check of the final end screen, for instance.
Play teacher and grade this piece of shit. Since it's really short, let's say 10 points off for every error out of a possible 100. So okay, you ready? Here we go. Well, first of all, congratulations spelled wrong, but it's not even a simple typo. 2 letters in 2 different places are wrong, which probably means they really didn't know how to spell it. So that's 20 points off for that, just because it's such an atrocious misspelling. Then, you've completed a great game? Well, that's just simply wrong. 20 points for that statement.
He then also covers the Atari and Sega Master System versions of the game, respectively. The Sega Master System having some improvements, but still overall a shitty game. Finally, the third in the trilogy, the nerd covers the Ghostbusters 2 NES game, as well as the Sega Genesis Ghostbusters game, ending the marathon on a more high note.
The game actually has levels with a simple goal to get to the end without dying.
And that's what I'm fucking talking about. Ghostbusters should be nothing more complicated than just running around zapping ghosts. So it's a huge, huge improvement over the first game. But that's not saying much. It still sucks monkey fucking pukes diarrhea up your fucking asshole.
This whole trilogy of videos feels like one continuous video, and I have fond memories of watching through all 3 of these time and time again on my PSP back before I had any sort of computer or anything. I would literally fall asleep watching these videos from beginning to end. A strange thing to do maybe, but true all the same. Up next is Spider-Man games. This is one of the funniest episodes of the season to me, for one particular reason. Spider-Man and the nerds' interaction with one another.
Holy shit, it's Spider-Man!
You need some help with this game?
I sure do. This shitty ass fucking game's driving me nuts.
This game can't be shitty. This is Spider-Man.
Yeah, it's Spider-Man, but I'm sorry, Spider-Man. This game really does suck.
You must be doing something wrong.
Throughout the episode, the nerd plays through several of the worst Spider-Man games ever made, shitty and confusing controls usually being their primary issue. All while the Spider-Man tags along for the ride, excited to play all these games about him as he slowly gets more and more disenfranchised and depressed that there are so many shitty games with his name attached to them.
Oh, there you go. Watch out. Don't get, he's gonna hit me. Ah! Oh, you're falling. Oh my god. When you let go, you know what's gonna happen? When you let go of that button, you're gonna fall.
Alright. You know, this is starting to piss me off, actually.
There you go, come on. Ah, you died.
Well, you're talking to me.
It's a great concept for an episode, and when you consider most episodes of The Nerd that have a special guest or usually an antagonist of some sort, forcing him to play said game, and is kind of an overused and beaten to death trope that's still used by game reviewers to this day, by the way. Having a friendly, cool character come in to experience the games alongside the nerd makes for some pretty good comedy and is definitely a little different than the average episode. I especially love when Spider-Man Backseat plays the video game for the nerd, something that I think anyone who grew up playing games with their friends or family has experienced at least once or twice before, only for Spider-Man to try the game out for himself and have the same issues that the nerd was having.
Look, see, you can't even kill that one guy.
But is it necessary to kill him in all honesty? Do we have to kill everybody we see? I'm the nerd. Look how I play. I go back and forth. This is what the nerd does. He just goes back and forth. And this is what was fucking annoying me. You go and there's nothing up there, so you go down. And you go down. And you kill something and you fucking go down. You go down and you can't go that way. So you go up. Alright, god damn it. There's nothing over here. What the fuck's the point of this? Alright, you know what? This game is a piece of shit. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I don't know where the fuck I'm going. I can't get up here.
Do it, damn it.
Jump, 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 jump. It's a piece of shit!
I suspect there might be a bit of a meta joke to this as well, Spider-Man perhaps playing the role of the audience, those who persist that the games aren't really as bad as James makes them out to be as he's playing them, effectively backseat gaming through the internet. It's also noteworthy that you can tell quite a few segments of this video were completely unscripted, and that can make for a couple silly moments where it's very clear that James is trying not to laugh as Spider-Man says stupid shit, but it also makes for a few standout lines here and there. The episode ends with a quick song about Spider-Man's depression and the nerd having had enough of these Spider-Man games. An overall, great episode.
Spider-Man takes a dump in a coffee can, plays some games with a grudge, gonna shit out some anal fudge. Look out, here comes some shitty games. Alcohol is his power source, takes a piss like a drunken horse, climbs a wall, then he falls. This game sucks his spider balls. Oh no, he's playing the shitty games. When he plays his games, he feels so ashamed. He shoots web from his wrist, but now Spider-Man's fucking pissed. Angry nerd, rather suck on a frozen turd or eat some crap from a moose. Gonna chug down some poopy juice. These games are such a great big fuck up. They make you wanna throw up all over Spider-Man.
The next two videos feature the nerd covering the vast number of Sega CD and less vast number of Sega 32X games, the both of them being extensions for the Sega Genesis console, or the Sega Mega Drive for everyone else. The two of these videos work as not only a great look at both the consoles with bits of history spread throughout, but also a supercut of some of the most popular games on both consoles. Similar to the Atari 5200 video, there's also a few moments when he describes the assembly of the consoles and the issues with having both the Genesis extensions on at the same time.
First you have to own the Genesis. And if that's not enough, Sega made another Genesis attachment, the 32X. Yes, this ugly mushroom-shaped piece of shit was the last effort from Sega to keep the Genesis alive to compete with its nemesis. You plop it on the top of the Genesis like they're mating. God, I mean, do you think that's enough add-ons? It doesn't even look aesthetically presentable. I mean, it's just like an ugly tumor. I mean, did they really need all this bullshit leeching on the Genesis? That poor Genesis is just thinking, oh please God, take this shit off me. It's like getting gang raped. Both of its slots are getting fucked at the same time. Hooking up this bastard is just insane. Believe it or not, like the Sega CD, it has its own fucking power adapter. That's great. I mean, now you got three. And trying to hook them all up at the same time is a friggin' nightmare. Let's look at the most minimum amount of effort it could possibly take. So I'm plugging it into the TV. I mean, now I obviously can't plug in all three of these things. So here's the most basic power strip you can get. Every big store sells these things. These are common. So I plug in my fucking power strip or whatever. Here goes the Genesis, the Sega CD, and bullshit. What a load of fucking bullshit. How did they fuck this up so bad? So anyway, let's fire this monster up and play some Primal Rage. Great title screen, huh? There isn't even any title at all. What is this? Wait a minute. Oh, please, God, tell me what's going on. Why can't I see the characters? I'm playing Invisible Primal Rage. Alright, let's try Virtua Fighter. What the fuck? Guess what? We left something out. There's another cable which connects the Genesis to the 32X. Isn't it enough that the damn thing is inserted onto the top of the Genesis? Why does it need another connector? Look at this. It's a fucking mess.
Most of the games are regulated to a sentence or two. A joke here, a bit of commentary there. These episodes are fairly good, though I'll admit watching them now, I almost feel like they could have gone into more detail over some of these games, as well as cover more of the Sega 32X's library, including Knuckles Chaotix. I understand on some level he was just working with what he had, but still, all the same, it would have made for some pretty good jokes. But still, these are two pretty good episodes, and the way the nerd describes the 32X's shape always gets a giggle out of me, as well as the ending to this duology just being an overall really iconic nerd moment. The Silver Surfer. This is one of the more interesting episodes of Season 2 for really two main reasons. The first reason is that this has to be some of the most genuine feeling anger from the nerd yet, as well as the game being just so blatantly difficult and over-the-top frustrating that it's really easy to relate with his anger. This is one of those videos that actually feels like the nerd is actually playing it there in the moment as he's yelling and screaming about it. The second reason this is an interesting episode is that you can tell the colors are way off in this video, with that piss yellow hue over the whole thing. Same with the next episode actually, and there are a few moments when the nerd's voice doesn't line up with his mouth saying curse words. James has said before that he forgot to fix the color saturation in this episode, which says both how busy he was making episodes at a very quick rate by this point, as well as how much of a difference just that little of a step makes. Anyway, here's a few of the absolute best moments that always manage to get at least a chuckle, if not a full-on laugh from me every time I watch them.
Look at that. That's not fair. I couldn't see that tiny bullet coming through the trees. It's like camouflaged. And the way those waves move, it's just like a bunch of flickering blue lines. It plays with your eyes and fucks you all up. What a cruel game. You know, it's so easy to die in this game, and every time you die, you have to see this. This sad, pathetic image of Silver Surfer just trembling in defeat. If you play this game, this image will be burned into your retina. And how appropriate, because this picture expresses better than words my feelings on this game. Just look at it. That sums up the whole thing. So now we're in Firelord Section 2. Whoa, watch the fire. Oh, shit! Fucking jack-o'-lanterns? Alright, let's try again. Dodge the fire, stay up and watch the jack-o'-lanterns. Oh, better watch that thing. Oh, God, I gotta go down. Oh, fuck! Your mother. Fire's coming down. Got that part under control. Watch the jack-o'-lanterns. Fuck! Touch the damn ceiling. Fire's coming down. Jack-o'-lanterns. Oh, ass! Alright, this time I'm trying to shoot those fucking jack-o'-lanterns. Stay back. Oh, God. Alright, getting into place. Watch the walls. Oh, you fucking pumpkin piece of shit! Alright, gotta watch out for these statues puking lava. God! Another motherfucking pumpkin. There's so many obstacles, it's unbelievable. I can't touch that red pot!
I also like these bits where he visually shows the game's dead zones to really give a clear picture of just how unforgiving the game is, as well as trying his best to describe how hard the game is as a whole.
Imagine if I were to draw a maze on a sheet of paper. I'm asking you to draw a line from the beginning of this maze to the end. You can't run into any dead ends, and you can't touch any of the lines. Now, while you're trying to do this, I'm moving the maze to the left. It would drive you fucking nuts.
Not to mention, what has to be one of my favorite quotes from the nerd of all time.
This game is so hard, it would actually be easier to go outside in a thunderstorm and try to dodge rain. It would be easier to walk barefoot without your toes or heels touching the floor. It would be easier to pick fly shit out of pepper while wearing boxing gloves.
Alright, let's speed stuff up a little bit, get through some of the filler arcs of Season 2. Die Hard, this is the one episode from the season that I usually forget exists. Don't get me wrong, it's a good episode with yet another iconic finale, but it doesn't really stand out. Just kind of melts in with the others, if that makes any sense. The episode is pretty good at showcasing another difficult and somewhat cryptic game though, with what is probably the most intense nerd pressing buttons on a controller moment I've ever seen.
We're at a 45-degree angle. There's guys around every corner, there's guys coming out of the elevator, there's guys coming out of your ass. It's crazy. Damn. Fuck! Oh, you fucking bastard. Game's being ass!
Certain so-called retro gamers could really learn a thing or two from the nerd, still to this day when it comes to theatrics.
Geronimo, motherfucker! Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker!
Independence Day. Oh, this is probably the most boring fucking episode of the lot. You can tell that James didn't have a lot to say with this episode, or was working on something else while making it, and is thus just kind of phoning it in a bit here. Most of the episode, the nerd sort of says the same thing about the game being boring, slow, and unintuitive, and other syllables for I don't want to fucking do this video right now. He does go into some specifics, but this one just doesn't quite land the plane, if you know what I mean. But even whenever he's phoning it in, James' writing still has its moments.
The worst thing about this is that it makes me feel really guilty to be playing it. Like, I should be doing something better with my time. Like rolling dog turds in cement. Like, I gotta get away from this game. I gotta get out of this room. I gotta go out somewhere and do something wild. Like get a tattoo on my face of a goat holding up a baby snorting cocaine off its penis.
Fucking where did that even come from? The Simpsons episode, halfway through the season now. This episode is fairly laid back in tone, a bit like the last episode, but what prevents it from being so boring is how quickly he runs through both of the games he's reviewing. And similar to other episodes, you can tell that this is a game he grew up playing, and has had some of these complaints about the game for a pretty long time. But still, overall, this is once again an episode I forget exists all the time. It just doesn't really stand out. I feel like these 3 episodes sort of encompass a weird filler arc this season before we get into the straight row of just amazing episodes. So, with that said, slowing it back down a little bit, if ever there was a perfect time capsule, a cream of the creamiest crop, this next line of episodes will be it. Starting out with Bugs Bunny's birthday blowout. This is one of the most iconic nerd episodes of all time, and still to this day makes me laugh almost every time I watch it. The script's on point, the anger feels genuine yet over the top in just the right way to make it feel more cartoony, and the game's soundtrack, that being Bugs Bunny's birthday blowout soundtrack, has such a weird synchronicity with the tone of this episode. It just accidentally fits the atmosphere and tone to such a degree I just can't imagine it not having it.
Wow, how awesome could this be? Bugs Bunny's birthday blowout. Well, it was a blowout alright. Blow out your ass!
Not to mention Bugs Bunny, played by Mike Matei, being one of the absolute best characters for the nerd to play off of. Basically every single moment of the nerd interacting with Bugs Bunny is comedy gold for sheer delivery of these lines alone.
Oh my god, it's Bugs Bunny!
Yeah. What's up, Doc?
I can't believe it, in my own house, it's Bugs Bunny! Bugs fucking Bunny! Ugh! Ugh!
Yeah. What's up, Doc?
It is garbage. I'd rather put my balls in a crocodile's mouth while shoving my head up a unicorn's asshole!
God, I love the way he moves over the Bugs Bunny like that. I think James really wanted this episode to feel more like a Looney Tunes cartoon, of course given the subject matter of the episode, and he does that so well with this over-the-top performance. And with Bugs Bunny not being fazed by the beating whatsoever, being the smart-ass sort of character he is in his own cartoons, makes for some great chemistry with a nerd.
What's up, Doc? Ain't I a fucking stinker, motherfucker?
Ain't you a goddamn fucking piece of shit?
Yeah. What's up, fuckcock? Yeah. What's all the hubbub, bub?
Speaking of Bugs Bunny, I haven't really mentioned him as of yet in this retrospective, but Bugs, like every other character in the series that's not played by James, or Kyle Justin once in a while, is almost certainly played by Mike Matei. Mike was also helping as a co-writer from time to time on episodes, and drew all the thumbnails for every single episode during this era, which ranged from pretty alright to kind of complete ass, if I'm being honest. Mike does a pretty good job getting into multiple characters though. He's so good at playing an annoying, smart-ass, loud villain for the nerd. Anyway, then of course you have the big final birthday beating where the nerd beats the ever-living shit out of the bunny, and then takes a big ol' shit on him, ending what was one of the first episodes I ever saw the nerd back in the day, and one that I can say with confidence sold me on not only the character, but made me into the longtime fan that I am today.
You want some shit? Bombs away, bunny bitch!
Oh shit!
Oh, man. Don't worry, folks. It's not real. Fuck you, Bugs Bunny. Fuck you, Bugs Bunny. There you go. Got your ass handed to you.
Atari porn, just the title itself seems kind of interesting, doesn't it? This is one of the most fascinating episodes of The Nerd for one solitary reason. It's one of the most rare to find, literally anywhere. One could even call it a banned episode. Too risque for YouTube. You won't find it on James' YouTube channel, but instead only through the DVD and Blu-ray releases and YouTube re-uploads, of course. The actual video itself is also interesting, as to my knowledge, no one has really ever covered all the random porn games on the Atari quite like this video does. And it's interesting to think about this behind-the-counter Atari games that only adults could buy, the contents of which had naked men and women in them, pixelated, low quality, mostly using your imagination naked men and women, but still something, right? Though it does beg the question, how you're supposed to play with your joystick if you're busy playing with your joystick. Okay, I'm sorry, I'll stop. Anyway, this video is also pretty funny just because having the nerd react to this weird, archaic Atari porn is just kind of novel in of itself and leads to some pretty good edgy bits of comedy.
You get an extra life if you get 69 points. That's clever, right? You know, there's really something wrong with this whole scene. You gotta be a total fucking whore to stand naked at the bottom of a building with your mouth wide open to catch jizz from some guy jerking off on top of a roof. What kind of sick bitches are these? And what's the deal with this guy? Either he has a huge dick or he's a dwarf. I mean, what the fuck kind of game is this?
So overall, pretty good episode, but a strange juxtaposition to the one that comes after.
Get the power, Nintendo power. Get the clues that you can use, Nintendo power. Higher and higher, fighting your way through enemy fire.
Nintendo Power. If ever there was an episode of The Nerd that affected me in a major way as a kid, this one would be it. Opening with a killer opening song, this episode of The Nerd takes a far more chill and at times educational approach, where the line between the nerd and James himself are blurred as he talks about Nintendo Power, the famous video game magazine. I love that throughout the episode we not only get a bit of history about the magazine, but also what it was like reading those magazines back in the day. What sort of stuff you would see, from the ads to video game reviews, posters, comics, etc. As a kid, I remember being enthralled with this history lesson, and to this day, the atmosphere of this episode makes me just want to chill out on my futon with a mug of cocoa and listen to him talk about this shit for hours on end. I remember late at night I'd sit in my bed rewatching nerd episodes on my PSP that I had downloaded from some shady website that allows you to download videos from YouTube and other places, including Google Video. Does anyone remember that? Anyway, I'd slowly pause and look at some of the magazine pages the nerd would show off, becoming passionate about what he was passionate about. I think it clicked with me back then that James was just as good at describing the feeling of loving and cherishing something as he was at describing the feeling of hating and being disappointed in something. Anyway, this episode affected me in a major way because it inspired me. I'd be lying if I didn't say that there was a sort of irony to me reviewing the atmosphere and feeling of watching this episode about the nerd reviewing the atmosphere and feeling of reading these magazines. It's because of videos like these that I always feel the need to describe the feeling something gives me when I talk about media. Even if I'm trying to be mostly objective, I usually will always take a moment to talk about my connection to it in some manner. So much like how James cherishes those old Nintendo Power magazines, I always cherish this episode as something truly special. Oh, and also, always remember this line.
This one's cool because it's an owl, and owls are cool.
You heard it from the angry nerd man himself.
Da 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 dum, 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 da 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 dum.
Fester's Quest. So this episode is definitely a bit of an in-between one for the two masterpieces to come, but it's still a fairly solid episode overall. The actual game in question is one of those that's fairly self-explanatory why it's annoying and a hassle to play through. Though I will say the skit of having the nerd dressed as all these Addams Family characters isn't really utilized very well at all. Most of the characters don't even speak, and while the nerd notes that there are several other Addams Family games, he only plays one other for like less than a minute of the video. This is one of those episodes that I feel like if he had given it the time, played more of the games, maybe had a gimmick that every Addams Family member had a different game to suggest playing to the nerd or something like that, this could have been one of the best episodes. But as it is, it's a fairly rushed video, more of a little taste of the horror themed main course this season was soon to serve up. These next two videos are, by my viewing, and definitely, arguably, some of the greatest, if not the greatest episodes of AVGN of all time, and are definitely some of my all-time favorites. Of course, being a horror/slasher fanatic definitely helps with that choice. However, on a more objective level, everything from the cinematography, the script, and the subject matter all just line up to be the top-of-the-line duology that I have made a tradition out of watching sometime around Halloween every single year. The first episode begins with an opening crawl imitating the style of the famous text scroll from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
1983, a shitty game based on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, was released for the Atari 2600 by Wizard Video Games. It was a tragic failure and tried to aim for the adult market. Its pixelated violence was enough to get it banned from stores or hidden behind the counter, limiting its sales to obscurity. For them, an ideal hit movie-based game would become a nightmare. But had the game been well known, nobody would have expected, nor would they have wished to see, as much of the mad and macabre doo-doo diarrhea bullshit as they were to see in that sucky-ass game. Close to 25 years later, it will be discovered by one of the most frustrated gaming geeks on the internet, the angry video game nerd.
I really love the tone this initially sets up, giving us a bit of history on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game. The episode then opens on a very different setting than usual, the AVGN opening playing almost ominously on shots of a deserted area far away from society, giving off that distinct Texas Chainsaw Massacre look pretty well. We then see the nerd out in some lonely place trying to haggle a shitty old, but rare, Atari game off of a sweaty old man with a banjo. When we get to the actual review of the game itself, there isn't actually much game to talk about. Besides really the oddity of its existence, of course, it's a fairly simple game. Even still, the nerd combs through the entirety of it, discussing every single detail. We then get to the next part of the skit, where we're introduced to this crop top type character who claims to be the nerd's biggest fan, having broken into his house.
More like a AVGN. I'm your most far out fan, man.
Yeah, cool.
Whoa, man. So is this where you do all your videos?
Yeah.
Whoa, would you be able to give me a tour or something?
Yeah, okay, well, here's
Here's the games.
If you haven't noticed by now, this entire video has a grainy filter over it, imitating the gritty cinematography of the Texas Chainsaw film. It's a really nice touch. Then, much like the actual film, the nerd is then randomly pursued by Leatherface, only to end up pleading for help from the same old man from before and ending up knocked out by the exchange's end.
Batter up, bitch boy. Them motherfuckers! Don't tell me what I should do, 'cause they be motherfuckers!
We then reach the video's finale, with the nerd tied up in this beer box-filled garage of sorts. The cinematography here is once again great. I feel like I'm repeating myself with that, but again, when you compare it to damn near everything else that was coming out at the time, it's well worth mentioning time and time again. Frenetic jump cuts and dramatic zoom-ins on the characters' faces, and the game that the nerd is now being forced to play, along with the extremely grainy filter by this point, really showing through in this darker setting, creates an oppressive yet humorous atmosphere, similar to the Friday the 13th episode from Season 1. Intermixed between all the chaos, I love this particular line right here.
Well, if he don't like playing video games, why the fuck is he playing video games?
It all ends with a final chase between the nerd and Leatherface, all of it ending up much like it does in the Atari video game, with Leatherface getting stuck to a random piece of junk in the wilderness. We then end on a cliffhanger with one of my favorite shots of the nerd as he picks up the next game he'll be playing. Halloween. The next in the duology finds the nerd reviewing the Atari Halloween video game, along with a few other Halloween related games. All while the shape of evil himself, Michael Myers, stalks the nerd from the shadows. The commentary here is top notch. Even with it being a simple Atari game, there's a bit more meat here to actually talk about, from a game perspective. After that, the nerd then pays tribute to the famous speech from the 1979 Halloween original film, talking about the shitty game.
Alright, now, that's enough. You know, it's all coming back to me now. I remember once long ago, I had this game in my possession. I just remember seeing this blank cartridge for a pale, emotionless game with the dullest graphics, the most awful gameplay. I spent 8 years trying to figure it out, and another 7 trying to keep it locked in my closet because I realized what was living behind that game was simply evil.
We then get one of the funniest interactions with the nerd, period, which I'll show in full since I feel as though it really speaks for itself.
Oh, you want some trick or treat? Okay, here's some trick or treat for you. There you go, you little fuckers. There's some chocolate for you.
That's not chocolate, that's poop.
It's not chocolate, nor is it poop. It's shit.
You don't want some candy! I want some candy!
Oh, yeah.
Oh, take off your glasses! Be blind.
Hey, wait, I got something for you too. A shitty game.
What the heck is this?
It's an Atari game.
The heck is an Atari, you dope?
Oh, you don't know what Atari is? Oh, okay, hang on a second.
First you pull my bag and now you don't give me any candy. You're a dope.
There you go, have fun.
Hey, you dope, I want some candy!
If there's one thing that I have learned through all of Season 1 and 2, is that the nerd as a character works the absolute best when he has someone to play off of. The character's absurdity and general lack of care for anyone else, as well as his disdain for bullshit, makes him an interesting character in nearly any environment. Put that note in your feather caps, by the way, boys. This is something that will become a lot more important later on as the series goes on. The nerd ends up reviewing 2 more games before heading off to his babysitting job, Michael Myers stalking and waiting for his moment to strike. As it turns out, the 2 little kids who he shat in a bag for is now the kids that he has to babysit, both of them demanding that he plays the shitty game now, and then mocking him as he does.
And you smell like poo. You stink, you stink. Shut up. You suck, you suck. You stink, you stink. You stink, you stink. You smell.
Suddenly, the lights go out and the nerd has to go investigate the breaker. As dumb as this sounds, I remember this scene the first time I watched it back when I was a kid. Got me a bit nervous at night as the nerd traverses into the basement, the shape not far behind. Once again, the cinematography is great here, with several good angles being used. Anyway, Michael starts walking after the nerd, getting a face full of shit as he does, and both eyes gouged by Atari controllers along the way. The episode's finale then begins as the nerd escapes Michael's grip by giving him his own game to play with, which seems to confuse and piss him off a great deal. Then he gets beaten up by both of the kids, the nerd cheering them on as they do. The episode kind of ends on a cliffhanger, Michael escaping away unseen, and while it might have been kind of a dumb thing to think, I distinctly remember thinking that the next Halloween, or one of the next Halloween AVGN episodes, would bring Michael Myers back, with the nerd being in a hospital for some reason to play on the whole Halloween 2 plot. But unfortunately, that never happened. I feel like I've accurately shown off the second season well enough now. There are a few more episodes from here, including the Dragon's Lair NES game, the 2 Christmas episodes, and the Legend of Zelda timeline video, and the Rambo video game video. But I can only gush about this season for so long before I start to get a little redundant. Season 2 played into what was the first season's strongest areas, with good cinematography, skits, and other characters along the way, tightly written scripts with loads of humor, and more of an emphasis on the character of the nerd rather than the games themselves. The games will always be an important element of the series, but I'd argue that they are by this point about 25 to 30% of what actually makes a good AVGN episode, as all of these other elements I've mentioned are what really made the show not only iconic, but continue to stand out in what would become a flood of content and imitators. James' love for film and understanding of how to frame shots and tell short stories was an important element to how, when looking at what you might call his contemporaries at the time, he continued to be a landmark creator and someone to look up to. I'd like to look over some of the standout episodes of season 3 and 4 a little later, but first I think it's important to understand the scope of everything James was up to back in 2007. See, James was making much more than just nerd episodes. He would start what would arguably become 2 series that became just as popular and influential as his iconic series, starting with Monster Madness.
It's that time of year again, that's right. Another Halloween is upon us, and guess what I have to celebrate? Well, you've seen the Angry Nerd rip apart some retro games, you've heard the Bullshit Man rant about some random everyday stuff, and you've heard me, myself, review some movies. Now, for this Halloween season, every day in October, I will be posting reviews of some of the most important horror films in cinema history. Yes, that's 31 reviews in 31 days, all leading up to Halloween. They'll roughly be in chronological order, as I'll be taking you from the past to the present. This is Cinemassacre's Monster Madness, a history of horror films, and it all starts right here on October 1st.
Starting in 2007, James would start a yearly tradition he would uphold for a decade in releasing a video every day in the month of October in a marathon he would call Monster Madness. Every year, James would have a different theme of sort of horror films that he would cover, with the very first being a kind of history of horror up to that point, going all the way back to the silent film era and on into today. I remember watching through this series for the first time as a teen, and realizing how little I really knew and understood film history, even as much as a buff as I was even back then. And this first marathon really got me into the history of horror and film as a whole back in the day. I also really enjoyed James' commentary throughout the marathon, not only discussing why these films were so important, but also what they represented as times and fears changed over the many decades of film, and how each era of horror films reflected that. As cool as the nerd character was, in the end, James was and still is a film buff first, and this series was really his first way he could display that passion in a meaningful way. I mean, outside of the cinematography of AVGN episodes anyway. James feels really natural and in his element in all the videos of the series, and I would even argue that in another alternate dimension where James had never gotten popular from the AVGN and instead decided to make more film-based videos, I still think that he would have gotten very popular. Maybe not as popular since video games are a little easier to upload on YouTube and, you know, there wasn't really anything like that at the time. But all the same, I do feel like James' reviews of film and his understanding of them is one of the things that is the most appealing to me personally. The videos are informative, educational, and even funny from time to time, as well as pretty quick and to the point. And to say that I was inspired by these marathons would be an understatement. I mean, other than the whole small package, short and to the point thing, I mean, who am I kidding? I make nice, long, girthy videos for you all to enjoy. Wouldn't want to disappoint any of you after all. Anyway, next year for Monster Madness, James would do his famous Godzilla-thon, to which he reviews every single Godzilla film that had come out at the given time. And as someone who grew up watching Godzilla films, constantly renting out every single one of those kaiju films I could basically grab at Blockbuster as a kid, you could imagine how cool I thought it was that James reviewed all these films. I can also attest that while I had always loved Godzilla, I think I was in a stage of my life where I had started to really move away a little bit. But I can say that James' marathon really revitalized my love and appreciation for the series all over again. Something that I'll always be thankful for, especially as someone who watched these movies never really knowing other people who like them and always feeling kind of dumb for liking them in a way, since there are so many that kind of look down upon them and still do to this day. Besides the Monster Madness series though, which became the staple for James' Cinemassacre website, the other titular series James started during this time in 2007 was the all too famous You Know What's Bullshit.
You know what's bullshit? Pennies.
You Know What's Bullshit takes one of the great things about AVGN, that is a man bitching about video games, and then applies it to everyday annoyance relatable shit like shoelaces, the weather, pennies, etc. This is admittingly one of probably James' best ideas, as this series really captures that pure ranty style of video that was so popular during this era of the internet. Add the genuine annoyance and James' signature voice and funny inflections, and slight bit of sarcasm that comes with bitching about shit that really, when it amounts to fucking stupid little first world problems, and you have a recipe for an iconic series. Now, if I haven't quite made it perfectly clear to you by now, then let me just say that James was absolutely killing it in 2007, with hit video after hit video, tons of attention coming his way, several popular series under his belt, and as mentioned before, a whole world of imitators and people inspired by him, YouTubers that would come to follow in his footsteps, which only in the end made him even more popular as people would comment things like AVGN clone or comparing said reviewers to James, be it in a positive or a negative light, which brought all the more attention to James' series, which further perpetuated the growth, fans, imitators, etc. And speaking of imitators, now might be a good time to take a look at what YouTube was like outside our James-oriented bubble, and see what was some of the most popular and infamous content creators that spawned from James' advent, and see how they too impacted online content and the discourse to this day. There were many so-called AVGN clones, but as much as that term was often thrown around, it's really more of an insult that, looking back, didn't often apply very well, because if I'm being frank, most AVGN clones were just dudes looking at a camera, if even that, and mostly complaining about a video game as they play through it. While there isn't anything wrong with this sort of content, in fact, some of my all-time favorite classic YouTubers came from this exact sort of content, very few of these so-called AVGN clones were really imitating the nerd all that much, if at all, as very few had a script, even less knew anything about film or lighting, and even less had the ability or capacity to keep up with the nerd's production values. I feel like a lot of these videos might have originally stemmed from the AVGN, but then you also get that weird feedback loop where a bunch of people would then watch those people who are inspired by AVGN, in turn get inspired by those people, and then make videos of their own. I feel like there was just something integral about, well, that guy's bitching and moaning about games he doesn't like, I kinda wanna do that as well, and so they just, well, did that. I feel like many were unfairly branded as an AVGN clone when they were just making videos of that genre, that being angry game reviews. With that said though, when most people refer to AVGN clones, it's mostly one person that they actually have in mind. One who truly lived up to the title of AVGN clone, or perhaps more fittingly, a cheap Chinese AVGN ripoff. It could only ever be the Irate gamer. The Irate Gamer is a character created and acted out by Chris Bors. While Chris is worth a video all of his own, which he will be getting by the way, it's important to understand who he is and how his existence caused controversy on the website. Chris Bors released his first Irate Gamer video on his YouTube channel on April 28th of 2007, in which he played the Back to the Future video game for the original NES. As many pointed out, this was not only a review of a game that James had already reviewed, but it was also remarkably similar. This caused many fans to call him out and respond to the video, and note how he was being a copycat of the nerd, and while the shot framing is not at all as good as James, the back and forth between on-screen character being angry and then the game itself, along with the script sometimes speaking verbatim from James' video, made him stand out as an actual clone much more. This blatant copying would continue and would end up haunting Chris his entire career, perhaps befittingly, since he's never really acknowledged it other than making excuses for it and lying about it. Again, something that I hope to get to in a later video. Chris was sort of the laughingstock of this community, with many people making mock-up channels, parody videos, and as you'll soon see, even James and his friends poking fun at him. I remember quite distinctly that during this time that Chris was also not without his fans and avid supporters though, that fought tooth and nail for him, many claiming that it was in fact James who was copying Chris. And while this was just a blatant stupid lie, it did cause quite the flame war at the time, even being commented by another popular YouTuber and angry gamer man, Irate21.
You know, I'm supposed to be doing a tag video. You know, when somebody tags you and you tell them all about yourself. But really, I only have one thing to say to the general audience out there, and especially to a problem that seems to be getting worse and worse over the days. Now, I want to address the fans of the Irate Gamer. It's okay if you like his work. I don't care. Watch his work. Be my fucking guest. But the moment you claim that he came before me and YouTube has modified it so that it looks like me and James and a bunch of other people came before him, that's where you fucking crossed the line. And you crossed it so hard that I'm going to break my foot off in your ass verbally. This is what I think of the Irate Gamer. I think that every time I put on one of his videos, my insomnia is fucking cured. Literally, he puts me to sleep. He is not funny. He's unrelentlessly boring. He could put anybody to sleep. But this bullshit has to come to a fucking conclusion somewhere along the way. I was here first. Face the facts and get over it. Your fucking idol did not come before me.
Like I said, it's worth going into much more detail at a later date, but suffice to say, the Irate Gamer was a hot topic back in the day, and again, a pretty good laughingstock overall. Hell, I even vaguely remember Spax making a video commenting on the whole drama, when he wasn't commenting on his own drama, of course. And speaking of drama, there was a popular feud, albeit a faux feud, that became one of the first major collaboration efforts on the platform, as well as an important piece of nerd history.
Hello, I'm the Nostalgia Critic. I remember it so you don't have to.
Ah, yes, the Nostalgia Critic. Doug Walker's signature series, and no matter how you feel about it today, it is undeniable it was instrumental in the evolution of online content creation, its shockwaves still being felt, for better or worse, to this day. Originally starting on YouTube in July 3rd of 2007 with a review of Transformers, Doug's new series would prove quite popular, and that is until they would be taken off of the platform due to Doug's heavy use of movie clips in all his videos, all of them being copyright claimed, forcing Doug to move all his production of the series to his own website, thatguywiththeglasses.com. Later, erroneously named Channel Awesome for some putridly imbecilic reason. Doug, or I should say the Critic's, reviews of 80s and 90s kids films had that same rant energy that many content creators had during this time, and while I would personally say that Doug's series hasn't exactly aged as well as James has, it is nevertheless an important note in history, especially considering just how many content creators Doug himself would spawn at the time, and even hire to be part of his website as well. However, unlike the other imitators thus far, Doug was sort of doing his own thing. In fact, I think the main reason anyone even compared these two was due to one of the more interesting chapters of nerd lore, one that I like to call the Angry Nostalgia Nerd Collab. So this whole thing starts with a video from Doug Walker, quote-unquote, responding to the AVGN fans who have been calling him a copycat.
One of your fans comments on my video saying that I am very similar to you. Oh yeah, an angry critic who's obsessed with the past? Never seen one of those before. But the fact of the matter is, these comparisons keep coming and coming and coming. As both you and I know, there is no comparison. I am by far the greater talent. I mean, you may have reviewed bad video games, but I reviewed bad movies based on bad video games, which is far worse. You may have reviewed the third Ninja Turtles movie, but I had the courage to review all 3 in a row. P.S. Horribifuckus is still copyrighted. And you may have beaten the shit out of Bugs Bunny, but that's nothing. Here's a taste of what I do to myself. And if that's what I can do to me, just imagine what I can do to you. So, I say to you, angry video game nerd, if that is your real name, Keep your fans under control. You don't see my fans leaving threatening comments all over your videos, like they should be. So, please, leave this petty, jealous rage behind you and simply acknowledge that I'm the better man. If you accept this defeat, please respond by leaving absolutely no comment whatsoever. In fact, don't even respond to this video. In fact, act like you have a million other things going on in your life that you wouldn't even have time to watch this video, let alone respond to it. Do that, and I will accept your apology. But if there are any more outbursts out of you, Mr. Video Game Nerd, I swear to God, there will be words. Followed by some more words. Followed by maybe a few more words. And then topped off with an ass whooping! I am talking nerd on Critic action, and I assure you it will not be pretty. It will be very unpretty. I'm the Nostalgia Critic. I remember it, so you don't have to.
This was then followed by AVGN fans calling out to the nerd that the Critic had called him out, which the Critic reads as follows.
Some of his videos. His Cloverfield review was hilarious. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he did the 5-second movies also. Those put me to tears. So yes, call me a fan of his. Well, what the hell am I supposed to do with that?
This is then followed by the Critic trying to find the hidden insult that the nerd has for him in said post, which leads to this pretty funny payoff.
Of the illusion. Who are you? Who am I?
We're all monkeys. The clues are set. I just have to crack the code. Okay, after a really long time of investigating, I think I finally figured out the secret of the message. And so, the angry video game nerd's message translates out to Tis ein Kitzel Sitturk I Glassen, which isn't German, isn't Latin, and isn't Gaelic, which means it's complete and total gibberish! I just wasted hours and hours of research to come up with absolutely nothing! True, I discovered an untraceable pattern in the stock market that would lead to nothing but higher returns, but that's inconsequential! I've wasted my life, dedicated everything to complete bullshit! I mean, look at me! Look at me! I look like a roadmap for dizzy people! I guess he really had nothing bad to say at all. And here I wore my thinking wig for nothing. I guess the angry video game nerd really is the better man. I guess it's best just to acknowledge that in a world of vengeance, anger, and chaos, there are those who can always find the peaceful route. And in the end, maybe that's the essence of all mankind.
Later on, when Doug set up his own website due to YouTube copyright striking all his videos to hell, in his preview for the new website, he also showed off one of the next big videos he would be doing, a review of the Wizard film, and would find that the nerd was so too going to do a review of the same film, and made a preview for it 24 hours after Doug's website trailer, which had the Critic respond as follows.
You dirty, stuck-up, sadistic, shit-eating, cock-sucking, butt-fucking, penis-smelling, crotch-grabbing, ball-licking, semen-drinking, dog-raping, Nazi-loving, child-touching, cow-humping, perverted, spineless, heartless, mindless, dickless, testicle-choking, urine-gargling, jerk-offing, horse-face, sheep-fondling, toilet-kissing, self-centered, feces-puking, dildo-shoving, snot-spitting, crap-gathering, big-nose, monkey-slapping, bastard-screwing, bean-shitting, fart-knocking, sack-busting, splooge-tasting, bear-blowing, head-swallowing, bitch-snatching, hand-jobbing, donkey-caressing, mucus-spewing, anal-plugging, hole-grabbing, uncircumcised, sewer-sipping, whoremongering, piss-swimming, midget-munching, douchebag, hoe-biting, carnivorous, mail-order prostituting asshole! You just couldn't let me get to it first, could you? You just had to steal my thunder. So it seems that the angry video game nerd has officially become the irate gamer to my incredible genius. Okay, alright.
All this finally led up to the nerd giving an official response.
I'm the fucking nerd. And there's this guy called the Nostalgia Critic.
I remember it, so you don't have to.
And he's been talking about me an awful lot lately.
I have a bone to pick with one angry video game nerd.
So here's my big comeback to you, Nostalgia Critic. You suck. Yeah, I got pens, and I'm not afraid to use them. Now you might be thinking, is that his comeback? Is that all he's got? Well, no. I got more. You're a poopy head. When we spell it out, you're a poopy head.
Shit-eating,
Dunghead.
cock-sucking,
Shithead.
butt-fucking,
dookie brink,
penis-smelling,
rat face,
cow-humping,
fecal face,
testicle-choking,
bird. I really like how you deciphered my hidden meaning.
There is a hidden message inside of this comment.
There's 38 words in the message. 38 words divided by 2 weeks is 19, which would be S.
Well, you were close. It was actually lick my balls, you piece of shit Nostalgia Critic. Yeah, we're pretty even. You did the Super Mario Brothers movie before I did. Well, I got to the Wizard before you did. So, in your face. No matter how many YouTube channels you create, I am the domination of the internet.
He also notes through this entire video that this is meant to be satirical, something that I don't think is really needed given the tone, but then I think, of course, two angry internet personalities going at it with each other for fun wasn't really a thing back then. You know, it's kind of commonplace these days. So maybe James really wanted to spell it out for those who weren't in on the joke. Anyway, that video of course led to the critic responding back and inciting a challenge to the nerd to review the worst nostalgic movie he or his fans can think of. This would then culminate in a video where the critic walks in on the nerd and Captain S, we'll get to him in a moment, at a digital press event.
Gotta fight.
So, Critic, how dare you come here? Critic!
Have you accepted my challenge to review a horrible nostalgic movie?
Yes, Nostalgia Critic, I do accept your challenge. But you must suffer at a bad game.
E.T.
Hold on, guys. Hold on.
I'm on a bad game. The Dread Department.
I thought this speech was all online. I didn't think this was for real.
You stay out of this,
You had
ass!
like 10 disclaimers on your video.
Listen, you know, just because we saved Christmas together doesn't mean you have to be involved in this. You can just, this has
Get out of this, ass! This
That's
isn't your
old,
business!
James.
Out.
Who are you? Sorry, are you on
Between
YouTube
me
or something?
And the nerd. I was almost as popular as him. I was like number 50.
This leads to the nerd accepting the critic's challenge and putting up a challenge of his own for the critic to review a shitty game in return. With the challenges now set, the two were ready to prove who is the real internet angry guy, but not before they both have a slow-mo fight in the parking lot, which they do, and also Captain S is there as just kind of a third wheel of sorts. The nerd would go on to review Ricky 1, a Rocky knockoff / parody film, to best his part of the challenge. The review is pretty laid back, no skits or anything, but to be fair, the movie he's reviewing is so fucking weird and out there, I'm not really sure how much commentary one would have to give besides just look at it. Though, in a really ironic twist, I now understand that it was done this exact way to best imitate the critic. Just a still shot of a dude sitting down and complaining about a weird movie in a linear fashion. Meanwhile, the critic admittedly does the better of the two videos, because he's now imitating the nerd's style, with actual camera work and intro, etc. The intro even has a remix of the AVGN theme song sung by Kyle Justin himself.
He's gonna take you back to the past to pull these reviews out of his ass. He'd rather have a crocodile pin him down and suck on his cock. He'd rather eat some rotten dog shit than drown it down with rolling rocks. He's the world
As for the review itself, it's actually really funny, with his reviewing the SNES Bebe's Kids, which the critic describes as follows.
For those of you who are fortunate enough to pass this movie up, I'll give you the premise. The film is about a guy who has to take 3 bratty kids to an amusement park as they do nothing but cause trouble and panic. The film was so bad that even the trailer couldn't make it sound good. I mean, listen to this tagline.
Bebe's Kids. It's animation.
And that's about all they can say about it. They can't say it's a good film, a funny film, or even a film. All they can say is, it's animation. That's pretty bad. Because someone at Universal foolishly thought this film would be a hit, they did a video game tie-in for the Super Nintendo. Now, this film was based on the stand-up comedy of Robin Harris, which he based on real-life events. So let me get this straight. I'm reviewing a game, based on a movie, based on a stand-up, based on some woman's annoying kids? Well, if that's not the setup for the best damn video game in the world, I don't know what is! Let's review this fucker! Yeah, as you can tell, it's been a while since I used this.
The review has a couple of well-acted bits of anger and jokes here and there. You can tell Doug is hamming this roll up, since this was bound to be one of the biggest videos by this point in his career. And it shows, being in my opinion one of the best videos and funniest videos the Critic has ever made, though I'm not sure if this says more about the James AVGN video formula or the Critic's otherwise lacking timeless appeal or humor when he's not trying to be the nerd. But either way, the Critic makes for probably one of the best AVGN clones around when he's, trying to be an AVGN clone. Later on, after both videos had been made, the two would apologize to one another, having a newfound respect for one another having to suffer through this insufferable shit.
What was that? What the hell's going on? What the flying f***?
Critic! Nerd! So, you're still talking shit about me, huh?
I will never stop talking shit about you until you retire or die! Or retire then die, or die then retire.
Alright, things have gone far enough. I have one thing left to say to you. I'm sorry.
Bring it on, nerd! You want a piece of me? What?
No, seriously. When I sat down and reviewed that Ricky 1 movie, I realized how hard it really is to have to sit down and review a movie like that.
Oh, well, to be honest, Bebe's Kiss was a real pain in my ass. I guess that made me realize that reviewing horrible games isn't all that easy either.
Before going right back at each other's throats.
I don't know. It's pretty ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, it really doesn't matter. Just the fact that I'm the better talent, nobody really cares. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I guess you have a point there. It makes me realize that, What?
Aha! Yeah, but don't worry. It's not like you have to stop making your inferior videos.
Suck my big fat snozzage, you festering ton of ass!
Ah! Fuck you, you fucking cocksucker, big fuck Bart!
Alright, let's settle this. Let's settle this once and for all. A giant epic battle of nerd on Critic action violence to the death!
Oh, okay. You want your nerd on Critic action? Well then, show me that you have the balls, get your ass over here, and we'll have the final battle.
Alright, nerd, let's settle this. Let's settle this forever!
Get your ass over here!
Fine!
Leading into the big final battle between the nerd and the critic.
What are you, raising a barn? Shut the fucking door!
Oh, just hurry up and take me! these piles of boxes around? Honestly!
Oh, don't you talk about my boxes. I like boxes.
That's the fuckest thing I ever heard, shit mop!
Shitload of fuck.
Fuck monkey!
I'm giving you both middle fingers at full force.
Cow-humping transvestite!
B5-0, fuck you!
That's it! Wait! Would you let your brother die?
Brother? You're my brother?
Yes, I am your brother.
Well then, surely you know the name of our mother.
Well, of course I know the name of our mother. Elizabeth? Oh, blame a guy for trying.
Super Mega Death Troll's
They have a big special effects fight, tossing insults, fighting each other Street Fighter style, like a Jedi and Sith style, and then having the Critic unleashing the powers of hell on the nerd before the nerd unleashes the power of Super Mecha Death Christ to come and kill the Critic. It's just as crazy and silly as it sounds. I point this era, this angry nostalgia nerd collab era, out for a few reasons. One is that it was instrumental in getting the Critic to the famous online status that he is at today. Now don't get me wrong, the guy had an audience already, but this is really what perpetuated him into something everybody knew, that they put to the same standard as the AVGN. Number two is during this time, I have fond memories of watching these two go back and forth with each other, and in turn also remember all of the fan art and the fan reactions as they all eagerly awaited each new development in this epic battle between nerd and critic. The final battle was even something that was heavily advertised on both sides and had droves of accompanying fan art as always. This was a fun time to be had if you were a nerd and critic fan at the same time, and I think it also speaks to the innovation of James and Doug during this time. Now the idea of doing a big collab is sort of the norm around YouTube, and hell, even the false feuds, though instead of a cool little battle movie, we have content creators jumping into a boxing ring, which you have to pay for to watch, and is usually a tie or something, so that they both end up looking good by the end. Yeah, it's just kind of gotten more stupid, hasn't it? But nonetheless, James was once again an innovator in his field, and this wouldn't even be the only collab he would do during this time, which leads me to one of the much more obscure corners of nerd lore, and that being Captain S. Captain S is a character played by Brett Vanderbroek, which was a series on Screw Attack alongside AVGN back in 2007. Captain S is, well, maybe it's best you look at the intro and see for yourself.
He's Captain S, and he is one hell of a guy. He's Captain S. Be glad that he is on our side. The bad guys do not stand a chance. They see him and they wet their pants. He'll kick their butt from here to France. Oh yeah, he's Captain S.
Back in the day, Screw Attack was really trying to be ahead of the game, you know? They were at the forefront of video game entertainment, and they were kind of giving money to quite a few content creators. Of course, AVGN was their big guy, but there was a small bit of time where they were really hyping up Captain S to be right alongside the nerd. Perhaps Captain S is one of those video series that is also worth a more in-depth look at a later point as well. But suffice to say, it was a short-lived series that I really am only aware of because there was a crossover episode with the nerd where the two characters save Christmas. And I mean also because I visited Screw Attack all the time back then, so I mean I knew him because of that, but I probably wouldn't have clicked on it if it wasn't for that episode.
He's Captain S, and he is one hell of a guy. He's Captain S, and now he's fighting side by side with the angriest gamer you've ever heard. He's the angry Nintendo nerd. He's the angry Atari Sega nerd. He's the angry video game nerd. I'm back.
Home Alone on the Nintendo Entertainment System. What a buttload of crud.
Yeah, this is sort of like a weird, lost, classic episode of The Nerd that you just don't hear about because not very many people are aware it exists. Much like Captain S as a whole, actually. The episode itself is pretty good, with Captain S's main gimmick being that the titular character gets sucked into a game at the end to, like, save the day or whatever. So, of course, The Nerd has this happen to him as well.
Silence, Crinkle. You are ours now.
Are you kidding me? I'm inside this abomination? God! This house looks even uglier up close. It's like a different blind person decorated every room. Who would do this to this expensive mansion? Is this a trap? It looks like a demented building block. Why can't I move any faster than this? I'll go hide upstairs. Okay, and climb. Okay, and climb! Alright, can't climb the stairs. I'll hide behind the bed. My head sticks out. This is retarded. How on earth am I supposed to hide from these lunatics when I can't run? I can't climb the stairs, and when I hide behind the bed, my freaking head sticks out. Ah,
The Captain S bit is alright. It's clear that they're going for a more lighthearted, Archie type vibe, which I suppose is a good contrast for the nerd, as well as Captain S apparently being, a Chad. Captain S and AVGN eventually meet up, have a disagreement.
Aren't you a little too short to be playing hero?
Jeez, that's gratitude for you. You gotta be the angriest guy I've ever heard.
Well, I'm the angry video game nerd. That's kind of my thing. Besides, spending Christmas Eve trapped inside Wrath of the Black Mana hasn't exactly been my idea of a joyous holiday.
You mean you've played this crappy game?
That's kind of my other thing.
Well, nerd, I'm sure this is fascinating to someone who isn't facing the threat of losing a major worldwide holiday, but oh, hey, I gotta go rescue Santa Claus.
I wouldn't go that way if I were you.
Why not?
You'll run into Tiny.
Ooh, Tiny, I'm really scared now. Who's the video defender here, huh? Please.
Whatever, no way I'm getting anywhere near that guy.
Fine, why don't you go try your way, see how far you get.
Okay, but you're gonna end up like Eris in Final Fantasy VII.
Ha! It's called Final Fantasy! Why would they make a sequel? Dimwit.
around, and then eventually have to save Christmas from this knockoff Xanatos dude and this red bad guy to save Santa Claus to save Christmas. Captain S was really weird, alright? I do really like the ending when they all gather together to say their Merry Christmases and the nerd dares to curse on their family-friendly show.
Bonne Nathalie! Joyeux Noël!
Happy holidays!
Feliz Navidad!
Merry Christmas! What?
You've been a very naughty boy!
The nerd finds a special Christmas gift back at home, one deserving of such a naughty boy.
Oh gee. Thanks for sending me this crappy game. Coal would have been nice, or even better, a bag of poop. So thanks.
Anyway, I mostly wanted to show this more obscure bit of nerd lore to all of y'all so that now everyone else can be aware of the Captain S spin-off and Captain S himself. As well as point out how James was working very close alongside Screw Attack during this time, with their series and influence over general gaming related media online at the time being unrivaled, especially when you consider the fact that James was releasing a new episode of the AVGN series every 2 weeks on a consistent schedule, while maintaining a growing level of quality, creating new and innovative series, collaborating with other YouTubers and content creators alike, and generally just being at the forefront of internet entertainment. So what about the other 2 landmark seasons of the nerd of this golden age era? Well, I don't think it's necessary to comb through all those episodes. Plus, I don't think we want an additional 2 hours to this already long video, right? But suffice to say, I would say that these 2 seasons are amazing. They upped the ante and kept the comfy vibes of sitting in a room with the nerd as he looked at shitty games and failed consoles, with the addition of more special effects, I think being the real show of extra quality from here on out. Season 3 is simply amazing, definitely some of the absolute best from the nerd, with a couple of these episodes being some of my all-time favorites, like the Super Mario Bros. 3 review, where the nerd reviews a good game for once. Well, alongside a little bit of a review of the Wizard movie that culminates in this big battle between the nerd, all his game consoles, Satan, and Super Mecha Death Christ.
Alright. Who wants some? Motherfucker!
Yeah, you know, things kind of escalated quickly, I suppose. Another standout episode from this season is the follow-up to that one, when the nerd looks at a whole lot of Nintendo-based accessories. This is one of my favorites, as it's not only interesting seeing all these old bits of technology on full display here and how they work, or usually how they don't work, but it's just one of those episodes that you once again get a good feel for the room as the nerd tries his best to make this silly, shitty stuff work. Plus, you gotta love this really dumb clip.
This works. No, of course not. It doesn't. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I need a beer.
I'm drinking Rollin' Rock on the Rollin' Rocker. Rollin' Rock, Rollin' Rocker. Yeah, Rollin' Rock on the Rollin' Rocker.
And this one always fucking gets me.
Yeah, it all comes down to tapping buttons, which brings us to our next accessory. Probably the stupidest thing ever invented. The speed board. What is it? It's a piece of fucking plastic. You attach your controller. You get it? In case you don't want to hold the controller with your hands, in case you enjoy playing on the floor or behind a table, then this is for you.
Then, of course, you have the standout of this season, the trilogy of Philips CDI videos, which sees the nerd covering the history of the infamous console, looking at what exactly made it fail, and then, of course, looking at all the Nintendo licensed CDI, Zelda, and Mario games. I remember these being such a big deal at the time, especially considering all the YouTube poop videos that use clips of these games almost exclusively sometimes. So seeing the nerd cover these games in depth during this time frame was a match made in heaven. Then, in Season 4, we have even more classics like the Atari Jaguar duology, the 4-part Castlevania series retrospective, and my personal favorite this season, the Godzilla games video. I can't tell you how much I loved this episode back in the day and still do to this day, and how much I personally related to it. Even though I grew up with what you might be able to say is the good Godzilla games, it was still pretty cool to see all the shitty stuff that came before, and imagine how it must have felt to be a Godzilla fan back in the day when you had to kind of wait for the good Heisei Godzilla films to come out in any capacity where you could watch them. And all the Godzilla games, all the good ones, were being made on, in fucking Japan, and then all the shitty ones, or weird experimental ones, are all that you got. I would also say it's one of those that really blurs the line between the nerd character and James' just genuine actual feelings. If you have for some reason never seen all 3 of these seasons of The Nerd, I implore you to go and give them a watch. And if you have watched them, but it's been a really long time, I hope this video makes you go back and look at them and really appreciate how innovative and ahead of their time they were, and how well they still hold up. I mean, there is a level of subjectivity, but on an objective level, cinematography, the writing, the quick and witty acting, it's all really top notch, especially considering when they were made. I'll always cherish this era of nerd videos as being some of my biggest inspirations for wanting to be a YouTuber in the first place. That might be a little bit of a cliche thing to say at this point, as a lot of people cite the AVGN as one of their big inspirations for wanting to do YouTube. But honestly, the guy just makes great content, and I feel like he kind of inspired a whole generation to want to do YouTube videos, to make content on the internet. And while many of them may not even make content that's similar to his, I really think that's important to understand just how many people this series affected and still affects to this day. But of course, to say that this was the golden age would then imply that there was an eventual decline in quality. But actually, at first anyway, it wasn't quality that started to fail, just rather quantity, unfortunately. James had already had a few times where it was pretty clear the work was starting to get to him. That weight of constantly keeping up this great content on a consistent bi-weekly basis while still making all this other innovative cool shit at the same time, with him lamenting the nerd series starting to feel more and more like a job. Despite this, the quality never seemed to fail, but eventually starting from season 5, there would only be one episode of The Nerd per month instead of the established 2 per month. Many has started to wonder if James was starting to get tired of making the nerd videos, and with the 100th episode approaching and nerd content slowing down, the future for the first time in the series' history seemed unsure. But James would come out with a video close to season 5's start with a special announcement. One that would shock and surprise many. One that at the time would seem like the greatest idea that James had come up with yet. But with hindsight, would mark the official end of the Golden Age. Tune in next time as we conquer the controversial beast that is the angry video game nerd movie.